everybody! A little while back, I made a Char Siu flavored snack stick recipe, and that came out very well, and it is a video that you can check out on the channel. But then I realized I've never even made a Char Siu video. So today, I am making this American-style Chinese barbecue pork. Sounds funny, but it's a thing that everyone's gonna love. So let's get started. If authenticity is what you're looking for, well then you've probably got the wrong video, friend. There are plenty of authentic Char Siu videos out there, but this is not one of them. That is, unless you're looking to make authentic Chinese American restaurant style bright red barbecue pork. Real Char Siu is marinated pork, usually shoulder meat, that's then oven roasted or actually grilled over a fire, hence barbecue pork. This is a cured pork product that's made to stay stable in the refrigerator for a long time. And while the flavor of this has a little bit in common with actual Char Siu, it's really been simplified and toned down. I guess muted flavor is how we roll out here. This is really just a flavored ham, but you know what? I like it. I like real Char Siu as well, but there is something nostalgic about this Americanized version that still gets me. So the first thing I need to do is prepare and weigh the meat that I'm going to be using, and that way I can get a better estimation on how much of each ingredient to put into the curing solution. But I don't know how consistent they are on which cuts of meat they're using, because they come in all different shapes and sizes. So I think sometimes they're using pork sirloin or just random chunks of cushion meat. Either way, there's never a lot of fat. But looking at this one, I feel pretty confident that this is a chunk of pork loin, which is what I have today. And it's also a good thing because these things are dirt cheap. So here's my pork loin, and even though it goes against everything I believe as a meatman, I'm gonna start by trimming off most of this fat cap. I know, as far as I'm concerned, this cut of meat is nearly worthless, and that fat cap is kind of its only redeeming quality. That is where all the flavor is. But the barbecue pork I am making today rarely has any fat on top. If so, it's just trace amounts. So I'm gonna take that fat cap off of there, and if it makes you happy, I'll just go fry it up and eat it straight. That would make me happy. Okay, I think that is about as far as I want to take it. So now I want to cut this into some more manageable chunks that will cure a little more quickly. So I think I'll just cut that in half. And then we'll cut each of these halves in half again. I'm just looking to get pretty evenly sized chunks of meat here that'll all cure in roughly the same amount of time. So now I need to get a weight on these, and then we can try to decode this recipe a little bit. When I'm trying to clone a product like this, the first thing I'm gonna do is take a look at the label and see what information I can gather from there. And the ingredients for this brand of barbecue pork are, of course, pork. The second ingredient is sugar. Then we've got soy sauce, water, hoisin sauce. There's some salt in there, and some sodium phosphate, which is not something that I have. So I'm just gonna leave that out. Then we've got grain alcohol, which I also do not have, but I do have a variety of spirits that I can add in here, so not a problem. Then we've got the sodium nitrite, and that is our cure. And then some various colorings. So nothing too crazy going on here. I think I can get very close with what I've got. The key is going to be estimating how much of each of these ingredients to put in this recipe to get as close as possible to this. And to do that, I'll drop down to the nutrition facts and see if I can find some sort of a primer or a starting point. Something in here that'll tell me the amount of at least one of the ingredients in here, and then I can use that information to fill in the gaps. And for this one, it looks like it's gonna be the sugar. Now this brand of barbecue pork has 6 grams of sugar per 85 grams of product. So that is 7% sugar content, and that is a good starting point. But there are 2 sources of sugar in here. There's plain sugar, and then there's also some sugar in the hoisin sauce. So for this recipe, I will probably go with 6% regular sugar, and then make up that last percentage with the hoisin sauce. So now, knowing how much sugar is in here, I know that is the second most ingredient in the recipe. So then I can start stepping down each of these ingredients based on how that stuff tastes and using these nutrition facts. A lot of times the salt is going to be your primer, but this one has 3 sources of salt in it. It's got the plain salt, soy sauce, and hoisin, so that would have been more difficult than beginning with the sugar. So I'm going to spare you guys the rest of the math. I'll go figure that out on my own, and then we'll come back here and see about putting this recipe together.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
Now, after a lot of consternation over this label, and using that sugar as the starting point, as well as the descending order of ingredients, I think I've come up with a recipe that is gonna at least be in the ballpark, but I think it's gonna be very, very close. So let me show you what I've got here. So the number 1 ingredient other than pork is sugar, so I've got quite a bit of sugar here. And then what this formula really came down to was deciding on a balance of soy sauce, hoisin sauce, and salt. And that did involve some pretty tricky math, at least for me. I'm a meatman, not a mathman. But in the end, it did work out so that the top ingredient is the soy sauce, followed by the hoisin, and then the salt, at least for the salt content in this recipe. And I'm going for a salt content right around 1.7%. And really, the flavor of soy sauce and hoisin is going to be what determines how close this tastes like that store-bought. So, apart from the sugar, soy, hoisin, and salt, I've got the cure here, and this is pink curing salt number 1. And since I don't have any grain alcohol here, I've got a little bit of whiskey. And that alcohol does have a little tenderizing effect, and this amount probably not gonna do a whole lot, but if I use much more, I might get in trouble for getting into the wife's whiskey.
How dare you?
So we're gonna keep this at just a shot. That's 1.5 ounces. And since that store-bought pork does just kind of have the look and the feel of a wet brine product to me, I've got some water here. And even though water is way down at the bottom of the list of ingredients, it's only going to count the water that actually penetrates and stays in the meat. And finally, and this is where I always catch heat in the comments, but just remember, I'm trying to recreate this product, and that color is not from any sort of cooking. That is the product of food coloring.
Oh my God.
So, I am gonna use some food coloring in this, and they have red and yellow listed. But before you go off in the comments, just remember, the word is optional. Every time I've used food coloring in the past, I've always said it's optional. It doesn't do anything for the flavor. But regardless, I always catch that heat down in the comments. But that's alright. If you want to go off in the comments, all comments do help. So I think we're all set to mix this one up and then get that meat curing. I'm going to start by getting the sugar, salt, soy sauce, and the hoisin in here. Now I will stir this thoroughly and then do a little bit of a taste test. Want to make sure to get that sugar all the way dissolved before I taste this. Well, I can certainly smell that hoisin sauce coming off of there. Check out that sip. Not too shabby. It's got a lot of that soy sauce flavor and a little bit of hoisin flavor, and that store-bought pork has very, very little of that hoisin kind of 5 spicy flavor, so I think this is gonna do. Of course, it's salty right now, but that's because the meat hasn't had any time to absorb any of that salt. It'll get all distributed throughout here when I get this on the meat. So now, I'm gonna get in there with the dreaded food coloring. No! I have no idea how much to use. So, I'm just gonna eyeball it. Ooh, that's strong stuff. That is pretty red, and they've got a little bit of yellow in there. I'll just go with a tiny bit of that yellow. And last, but certainly not least, actually very important, is the cube. My alarm. And last, but certainly not least, very important, get the cure in there. So now my curing solution is all ready to go, so it's time to bring in the meat. Alright, we're just gonna cure this in the bag. Now get all of that solution down in there. And when I'm curing or marinating in a Ziploc bag, I always like to put it in some kind of secondary containment, because Ziplocs are the devil and they often find a way to leak. I'll just squeeze out all the air. Make sure that everything is totally submerged in that colorful cure. And now this goes into the refrigerator to give that cure time to work its magic, and it's got to stay in there for enough time for that cure to penetrate all the way into the center of the meat. And that curing time is going to depend on the weight, the thickness, and the shape of the largest piece of meat that you've got in your cure. And I will put a link to a curing calculator down in the description of the video, and there you can just enter those values and it'll give you the right amount of time to cure your meat. These are about 2 inches thick. They're gonna take right around 5 days to cure, but due to extenuating circumstances, my jobby job, I'm gonna probably give these 6 or 7 days, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about cooking this. It's been a full week since I started curing these, so now I'll give them a quick rinse and see how they look. Well, it looks like I got that color pretty close. They are nice and red. We're going for that imitation smoke ring look. So now I just need to figure out how I want to cook these. And theirs has absolutely no smoke on them at all, so I imagine they're cooking those in some sort of a steam oven, which is a tool that I don't have. So I'm going to try a few different methods. I'm going to take a couple of these and I'm going to cook them in the sous vide water bath. I'll throw one of them in the oven, and of course you know I gotta smoke one, so I'm going to take one, I'm going to put some cold smoke on it for about 2 hours, and then I'm going to get that one down into the sous vide water bath as well. So it is time to get things heating up. Okay, just going to bag these up, get all the air out of the bag. And I'll set this to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll let this get heated up, and then I'm going to drop this in here, and it's difficult to say how long this is going to take to cook. It'll be up to temp in no time, but I want to tenderize it just a little bit. So it's probably going to be somewhere in the 3-hour range. I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on it, and if these start to juice out really bad, I'll get them out of there because I don't want to dry these things out. This cut of meat is very susceptible to drying out. Now, as far as the smoked one goes, I'm going to let this air dry for a little bit. I'll put the fan on it in the old sausage closet, and we'll get it out into the smoker. I'm going to keep that temp down as low as I can and just put a couple hours of hickory smoke on here. And then I'll bag it up and get it down into the water bath as well. And our last one will be our oven roasted. And I'm going to get a temperature probe in here. I'm going to put that in an oven, probably 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'll cook that to an internal temperature of 145 degrees. We'll see how that does. Alright, here comes my smoked one. I cold smoked that for 2 hours. We'll get this down in here. Okay. Alright. That one's done. Now, I am going to get these out of the bag. Let them dry out just a little bit, and once they're all dried and cooled down, we'll give them a try. Char Sius are ready, so now it is finally time to see how we did. So I've got the Char Sius that I cooked in the 3 different methods here, as well as one store-bought. And the first question is, can you tell which one is store-bought? Now, if I didn't know, I wouldn't know, but I would guess it is either this one or this one. And you may be able to tell if you can see this little thermometer hole right here that this one is the store-bought Char Siu. So as far as appearance goes, this thing is nails. Of course, what really matters is the taste. So the first thing I will do is just try this store-bought for my baseline. Again, it is really mild. You get a little bit of soy sauce flavor and just the faintest hint of hoisin. Now let's try my first Char Siu here, and this is the sous vide cooked Char Siu. And you can see the color is just a little bit off. It gets quite moist and steamy in the bag, and some of that color has washed out. Shouldn't affect the flavor though. Check out that bite. That is very, very close. This one isn't quite as sweet. It is really close. So if you want to be dead on, maybe bump that sugar up by 1% or even less. It's that close. And you can taste the hoisin just a tiny bit more in this one as well. But overall, nearly a dead ringer. Moving on, I've got the oven roasted char siu. And I cooked this at 225 degrees for a couple hours until it reached 142 degrees internal. Then I took it out and let it rest, and it came up to about 145, and that was perfect. Now, this color looks great. It is almost identical inside and out. Check out that bite. Oh. Now that is a bit of a surprise. The oven baked has a better texture than the sous vide, and it is even a little more juicy. I think you could get the same amount if you cut down the time on the sous vide. I went 3 hours on this, and this is probably 2/3 of a pound or so. I think I cut that down to 2 hours and I'd get just about the same result. But the color here is perfect, so no need to cook this sous vide. In the oven works just fine. That is great. And finally, the one that I am most excited for, the smoked and then sous vide char siu. Obviously, the smoked version is gonna be different than the store-bought because no smoke on that at all. But I think I had to try it. And check out that bite. Fantastic. It's just as good as the rest, but it also has a little extra on it. I really like that one. So I don't think this recipe could have worked out any better. This one is a near dead ringer for the store-bought, and I would say that this oven roasted one, dead ringer for the flavor, but it is even better as far as the cook goes. It is nice and moist and quite tender. Yeah, that is an A+ on that oven roasted one. The smoked one, absolutely incredible. It is different though, so if you want that exact style that you get at the grocery store, oven roast is the way to go. If you want a little something extra, you smoke that stuff, and you got something real special. I've got to try some of this with that extra hot mustard. Ooh, that hits you right between the eyes. I do love it when a plan comes together, and this could not have gone any better. The best part about this is that this store-bought char siu runs about $9 a pound currently, whereas I picked up this pork loin for $1.99 a pound, and then it's literally pennies worth of ingredients on this one. So if you do like this American-style Chinese barbecue pork, give this one a try, and you're gonna save a bundle of cash, and I know you're gonna love it. Thanks for watching. And I think what's even better is the Jesus. Someone's upset.